I was approached by Erwin Stoff with the idea of doing Call of the Wild. The trick being that this would be the first version that would tackle the entire novel from page 1 to the very, very end. And the reason that we'd be able to do that was that he was proposing we do all animated dogs. I had never read the book. My father had told me when I was young that it was his very favorite book of all time, but I'd never read it until we started the project. Once I read it, I came to understand very quickly why it is the most enduring thing ever. It endures because it is a parable for life. Fairy tales have this wonderful beginning, middle, and end, and they tie up very neat and pretty. But life isn't like that. And the thing about this that I think is so inspiring is that Buck's journey is like all of our journeys. We're going to grow up, and we're going to be compelled to leave home, and we're going to travel some kind of a path. That path, no matter how well we plan it, is going to have surprises, it's going to have failings, and the way that you deal with those things is going to define you. I think it's seeing Buck get in touch with these gifts that he didn't know he had. He was unaware of the strengths that existed inside him until he was challenged. One of the big challenges for us was to find an embodiment of the call. How are we going to see that? I came up with the idea of this black wolf, that at these moments where he's about to cross a threshold, he would begin to see this apparition, which is representative of the wild that is existing inside him. At first, it frightens him, as it would any of us. I think those kind of instincts, coming out. But then he comes to trust those instincts, and he begins to be drawn towards this apparition. Absolutely not. The most important thing in any storytelling is that you just understand who your audience is. You can tell any story, and understanding who your audience is just means that you adapt the way that you tell it. So we never had to skimp on any of the drama or any of the emotion to bring this to the screen. From my standpoint, my story is that it was very, very easy. We'd been thinking about who would be John Thornton, and we had just begun the process of looking around. And I was in my car, and Erwin Stoff called me up, our producer, and said, "How about Harrison Ford?" I'm thinking Harrison Ford, and I said, "Okay," and that was the process for me. I then found myself driving up to Harrison's house just a little while later and talking to him in person about the project. And at that point, he had already begun to, actually had stopped shaving. So he had begun his beard. He was very interested in doing it from the get-go. It's absolutely intimidating. I get nervous before I even do a recording session with anybody. We've recorded actors for our animated films. So I get nervous ahead of time, just, how's it going to go? I want it to go right. I want to say the right things and stuff like that. But inevitably, when you start working on a scene, everybody relaxes and you just get so involved in telling the story that it's actually a lot of fun. So yes, intimidated, but then it became a real joy to do. As we were looking to cast the lead, we always scanned dogs to start with, but we were having trouble finding Buck because he's a very specific, as described in the book, a very specific combination of two breeds. My wife, Jess, was on Pet Finder. She was looking around because we just wanted to find a new dog for ourselves. And she ran across that specific combination of breeds. There was a dog had been found in Kansas wandering the streets. He was in a shelter. She drove 2 days to Kansas to meet him, and they had named him Buckley. So she thought, well, this is meant to be. She bought him for $25 because he was on special, because nobody was buying him, nobody's adopting him. Drove 2 days back, and as soon as he walked on set, people looked at him and said, you know what, let's just make him the dog. So we scanned him, we whisked him off and scanned him, and then we rigged him. And the only thing we had to do later was that as Buck got healthier and healthier, he gained weight, and his tail went from being this little stick to being this huge fluffy thing. So we had to update the model a couple different times to accommodate the new tail.